Recently, I received an unexpected email from a psychiatric researcher working with the Department of Veterans Affairs. The researcher's inquiry to me was on the question of my thoughts of the use of music versus silence in therapeutic sessions with 5-MeO-DMT, the God molecule. As I found I had a great deal to say on this topic, I ended up writing this researcher a 6.5-page response. As this is an interesting question, and one that might prompt further inquiry, pondering, and questioning, I decided that I'd make this video with my response. I'm going to read what I wrote to this psychiatric researcher at the Department of Veterans Affairs as I wrote it to them, and perhaps will then be later quoted in the research paper that this particular team is working on. Here was my response. Full disclosure, I'm a musician, and my most popular collection of my original music on Spotify is my 5-MeO-DMT extended session playlist, Music for the God Molecule. So I have a vested interest in people using music in 5-MeO-DMT sessions. I'll have more to say about this particular playlist later in my response. And I will share a little bit more about some of the other playlists that I have on Spotify of my original music that are also intended for use with psychedelic medicines and psychedelic therapy. But first, my response to the question about music and 5-MeO-DMT. Overall, I'm a big fan of using music in conjunction with psychedelic medicines, including 5-MeO-DMT. I have no issue with those who would prefer to experience this molecule in silence, and if someone feels that their process is better supported via silence than having musical input, then that's great. However, I think that there are a number of advantages to using music and few real disadvantages, and it's easy enough to turn music off if desired. In crafting my response to this question, I will provide my perspective from several different vantage points. As a historian of 5-MeO-DMT use, being a participant in 5-MeO-DMT ceremonies and sessions, being a non-dual energetic practitioner who worked with 5-MeO-DMT with clients, and as an integration guide who assists individuals with integrating and understanding their experiences with 5-MeO-DMT, and also as a musician and psychedelic session playlist curator. Unlike some other psychedelic medicines, there is no clear historical use of 5-MeO-DMT in a ceremonial or healing context in any known indigenous culture prior to the current era. In this sense, there is no unambiguous 5-MeO-DMT musical heritage, such as is the case with Icaros with ayahuasca or Bawiti chants with the use of iboga, two traditions where there is a clear link between specific musical styles and psychedelic use. While use of bufo, the secretions of the Sonoran desert toad Encelius alvarius, has been incorporated into the ceremonial practices of several indigenous cultures contemporarily, such as the case with the Yaqui and Seri, where traditional toad chants are used in conjunction with the serving of bufo to ceremonial participants. The chants are either new creations or older traditional chants and songs that have been imported into the practice of serving bufo. In other words, the pre-existing chants get used because they mention toads, but they were not created specifically for use with bufo ceremonialism, though newer songs and chants are being created for this purpose. However, these indigenous cultures have only had bufo use introduced to them within the past couple of decades, and ceremonial use of bufo does not have any known historical antecedent. Despite there not being a history of use, currently toad chants are a common feature of such indigenous use of bufo and helps set such use apart from non-indigenous use and is part of the developing identity of these groups as being, quote, carriers of toad medicine, particularly in the modern marketplace of psychedelic tourism, where non-indigenous people attend indigenous ceremonies for their perceived authenticity. As such, the chants are identity markers and often make use of rattles and would be used in other expressions of traditional music and chants within these cultures. Overall, these chants and musical expressions are an important expression of cultural identity and serve to bring use of bufo into the already established cultural expression of the sacred, styles of prayer and ceremonial activity. In this sense, their use is an important aspect of ceremonial practice, but not necessarily because of the impact the chants have on the participants' experiences per se. Outside of indigenous cultures, use of bufo and 5-MeO-DMT has developed independently of indigenous practices, and because of the inherent perceived sacredness of the 5-MeO-DMT experience, has more often than not developed in a strict ceremonial context, as opposed to the very recent developments of scientific investigations into use of 5-MeO-DMT and related compounds for therapeutic use outside of a ceremonial context. For example, I was first served the pure molecule of freebase 5-MeO-DMT in a ceremonial context in the Temple of Awakening Divinity in 2008, which was led by an individual who was himself served 5-MeO-DMT in a ceremonial context by individuals who had been initiated into 5-MeO-DMT ceremonialism by their antecedents. The standard model in this loose ceremonial lineage was that participants should all be served individually, in turns, and that music that supported the experience be used for each participant's session with the medicine. Here, the music can broadly be classified as New Age, as opposed to the indigenous chants mentioned above, and is, quote, heavenly and angelic in nature, often with peaceful, soothing sounds, female vocals, lush synths or orchestral sounds, and more ambient than structured. Such was the case with the music used in the Temple of Awakening Divinity, Toad, during my time being served 5-MeO-DMT in this ceremonial context. Between January 2008 and the spring of 2009, I attended ceremonies at the Temple of Awakening Divinity with multiple participants roughly 10 to 12 times. For each ceremony, the same long, ambient, looping music was used, which was itself created by 5-MeO-DMT users. As the medicine was offered to each participant in turn, the music was gently playing in the background. Once the participant had taken their hit, the volume of the music was brought up as the lights were turned down. At the conclusion of each participant's turn, the music would be turned down or off entirely, and the lights would be brought up. Use of music and lighting in this manner helped to frame each participant's experience and marked important transitions within the overall flow of the ceremony. Especially when working in groups, having non-verbal cues that mark transitions can be a powerful modality for orchestrating ceremonies and group activities, as it bypasses the need to explicitly state directions and encourages everyone to sink into the overall flow of the proceedings through energetic cues. While it's generally true that at the peak of a full-release 5-MeO-DMT experience, individuals will have no awareness of outside sights, sounds, or stimuli, as by definition, these are non-dual experiences where there is no differentiation between subject and object, perceiver and that which is perceived. These stimuli are very significant features at the immediate onset of the action of the medicine, and even more so upon the reemergence of the structures of the ego and individuated awareness after the peak of the medicine has passed. This is especially true with the longer-lasting delivery methods that are applicable via pure 5-MeO-DMT, as opposed to toad secretions, which can only be consumed through smoking or vaporizing, such as injection, insufflation, etc., where there is a significantly longer on-ramp and come-down versus the extremely rapid action of vaporization. Here, having music to focus on can help the ego with the ubiquitous existential question of, what should I do? I'll return to this point below. Personally, I enjoyed having the standard soundtrack at the Temple of Awakening Divinity as a sonic support during my 10 to 12 5-MeO experiences I had there over a year and a quarter. The quality of the music was deeply supportive of relaxing, trusting, opening, and being present within the experience. Because the music was created by individuals who were well experienced with 5-MeO-DMT, it felt like a perfect fit, capable of both supporting the individual having the experience and also assisting and opening them and propelling them along. This would be the main concern for any music that is used in support of a 5-MeO-DMT experience that is meant as an actual functional adjunct of the procedure. In contrast, the toad chants that I've heard in conjunction with use of Bufo, for me personally, have not felt like a good sonic support of the experience and might even be experienced as a distraction. However, the soundtrack used at Toad always felt like a genuine support for the 5-MeO-DMT experience, like a cosmic bed of soft, supporting, nurturing sound that lifted up the individual and enveloped them in perfectly synchronized sounds. At least, that's how it always felt for me during my experiences. I'd note that it was always an option for participants to request no music for their session, though I don't think I ever observed anyone choose that option. Music doesn't need to be loud, intrusive, or even that present to support a 5-MeO-DMT session, meaning it can be quiet, mostly in the background, and just provide soft ambiance. This can be useful in both indoor and outdoor settings, as it can serve to help block out outside or intrusive noises, create a sense of intimate space, and can help the process feel present, like being wrapped in a blanket. When considering the use of music, I think that it's also important to take into consideration the facilitator's perspective and experience. There are many different ways that people go about facilitating, and also differences in what facilitators encourage with their clients. Personally, I took a very active role in facilitating and gave my practice the name of non-dual energetic therapy, and also encouraged active somatic processing, expression, and engagement from my clients. Here, 5-MeO-DMT was used as a powerful energetic amplifier, and music was also part of the energetic input. Having dynamic music can encourage dynamic expression, embodiment, and somatic releasing on both the part of the facilitator and the client. It isn't necessary, but it can help. Also, from the perspective of being a facilitator, as someone who chose to take 5-MeO-DMT along with all of my clients over our extended sessions of multiple rounds of medicine, I used my playlist of original music as a method of telling time and keeping relative track of where we were in the arc of the session. I might use cues within the playlist to determine that it was a good time to offer the client more, or encourage more passive resting, or when to start wrapping up the session, all without relying on a clock. Because I used the same playlist every time, it was a very effective means of keeping track of the flow of time and of the overall session. I particularly recommend the use of music for extended sessions with 5-MeO-DMT that involves taking multiple rounds of the medicine or when longer-lasting delivery methods are used. Having music playing throughout provides a natural ebb and flow to the process and also, very importantly, gives the ego something to do when it is present and active. In a session with multiple rounds or long-lasting delivery methods, there is going to be a significant amount of time when the ego is present, active, and engaged, and having music playing gives the ego something to focus on, relax into, and stay present with. Given that the ego is a perpetual doer, giving it something relatively passive to do, i.e., listening to music, is a good method to keep the ego occupied without it getting in the way of the full energetic process. Advice that I would often give clients during sessions and also review with them before starting was the idea that when you don't know what to do, just relax in an open, symmetrical position, listen to the music, and do nothing. Even when not physically active, avoiding, fighting, distracting, indulging, the ego can be busy internally trying to understand, trying to figure things out, trying to maintain control, and busy evaluating, judging, and assessing. Music can help bypass these habitual processes of the ego, especially when listened to in an enhanced state, such as while experiencing 5-MeO-DMT. Both before and after the peak, where the ego is most likely to be fully dissolved, 5-MeO-DMT still presents as profoundly intense and strong, and many people will describe themselves as tripping harder than I knew it was possible to trip. And this can be very agitating for the ego. While in that highly altered and affected state, the right music can provide emotional depth, energetic support, and even help inspire deep levels of somatic processing and vocal expression: purging, crying, toning, chirping, growling, purring, whistling, wailing, etc. While these effects can easily happen without any music, many clients comment upon later reflection that music helps them feel deeply supported in these unusual expressions and somatic experiences, and makes dealing with difficult or challenging emotions or energetic processes easier. Having sounds active in the immediate environment via music supports active processing and freely expressing. It can also be the case that clients are highly motivated by musical input to sing, tone, chant, or otherwise express themselves verbally, sometimes via glossolalia, and sometimes also with spontaneous movements in the body, where the entire event can appear as a highly choreographed dance or expressive art form, yet it is purely spontaneous and is not under any conscious direction. Sometimes this can happen without any direct awareness on the part of the client, and can be surprising for them to review if a video recording was made during their session. It's a curious question of whether this is more common when music is being played or not, and is perhaps worthy of further study. Dancing and/or yoga-like movements can also be ways that clients can intentionally process energy when the ego is still active and present during the longer come-up and come-down of slower-acting delivery methods of 5-MeO-DMT use, such as injection. In such cases, having music with more melodic flow and even beats can be useful. At the outset of a 5-MeO-DMT experience, nervous energy and anxiety can be common, and dancing and moving can be an effective way for clients to help regulate their energetic systems. Then, following the peak, as the ego is reassembling, it's very common for clients to feel an overwhelming sense of empowerment and being highly energized in the body. At this point, some will want to stand up and dance, and still others might engage in almost seemingly impossible acrobatic acts of unusual physical skill that they normally would not have the aptitude for, and during these times, having music with a beat and melodic structure provides a framework for them to somatically express themselves within. While such can all be accomplished in silence with no musical input, having musical input is a natural and fitting support for such processes, and is generally eagerly embraced and appreciated by clients. Many clients describe the music played in their 5-MeO-DMT sessions as, quote, perfect, and how, quote, every note was exactly what I needed. It is my opinion that one of the reasons that music can be experienced as deeply supportive of the 5-MeO-DMT experience is that many clients describe the 5-MeO-DMT experience as being beyond thought, beyond rationality, beyond discursive language, categories of the mind, etc., and unlike many therapeutic processes with psychedelics, is largely not about intentions, insights, or mental breakthroughs, and is more commonly experienced as a full somatic, energetic, and feeling experience. Music, particularly instrumental music, embodies such qualities in that it bypasses the rational, discursive, language-based mind and impacts the body directly at a vibrational and affective level where emotion, energy, and experience are communicated directly through tone, texture, shape, vibration, melody, harmony, resonance, etc. Indeed, it is these qualities of music that seem to lend it to being a powerful adjunct for post-session processing with 5-MeO-DMT. 5-MeO-DMT is notorious for producing reactivations. a term coined by the Facilitator who served me at the Temple of Awakening Divinity after my second experience with him, where, on the following day, I sat down to meditate and found with my first meditative breath that I could follow it all the way back into the non-dual unitary experience of infinitely expanded energy of 5-MeO-DMT. Finding my label of spontaneous endogenous release of 5-MeO-DMT to be too wordy and not scientifically verified, my friend suggested reactivation as a better name for this phenomenon. We and others in our immediate 5-MeO-DMT circle started using the phrase, particularly on my podcast, The Entheogenic Evolution, which has been a primary source of public information and education about 5-MeO-DMT. The term reactivation has stuck and is now commonly used in reference to a collection of related phenomena that can occur after a full release experience of 5-MeO-DMT and is even used in scientific research. While reactivations can show up spontaneously in a number of contexts, as I first documented on my podcast and in subsequent books and writings, they can also be intentionally induced. Here, music can be a powerful tool. Because we resonate with music at an affective and somatic level, listening to music used in a 5-MeO-DMT session can often trigger deep, ongoing emotional, somatic, and energetic processing for individuals that bypasses the egoic mind. As a 5-MeO-DMT integration coach, I often recommend to my clients that they ask their facilitators for their session songs or playlists in order to continue energetically processing post-session. Because reactivations often happen spontaneously and can be quite disturbing, particularly when they show up as night school, where individuals feel themselves launching into a full 5-MeO-DMT experience at the exact moment of falling asleep, or, also quite commonly, waking up between 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning in a full 5-MeO-DMT state. Getting some measure of control of agency over reactivations can be an important integration component for clients. Here, using the music played in a 5-MeO-DMT session to intentionally induce a reactivation can help relieve the energetic pressure and accompanying anxiety that can arise from disturbing, spontaneous reactivations, and help the client feel that they have some ability to turn them on and off and choose when and where to enter into the deep somatic process of the reactivation. Note again that this has nothing to do with mental insights, breakthroughs, or realizations. It's all about ongoing energetic experience and processing, which is also often experienced emotionally and possibly as related to expression of repressed energies from past traumas. Note of caution. Because the use of session music is such a powerful entry point into a full 5-MeO-DMT reactivation, it is extremely important that this technique only be used when the client has the time and space to energetically process and express without interference or other responsibilities. This effective music post-session is most potent in the 2-week window immediately after a full release session with 5-MeO-DMT. Because the effect can be rather dramatic, it is important for individuals not to have other responsibilities during the time of listening to the music, caring for children or others, being at work, driving, etc. The possibility of this effect should also be communicated to clients by facilitators so that they can make safe and informed choices. I once had an integration client who said that when their facilitator forwarded their playlist to them after their session while driving home, the music came on, a powerful reactivation occurred, and the individual almost crashed their car. As with all variables in psychedelic sessions and therapeutic work, results vary when it comes to using music for inducing reactivations, and results are not universal. For some, the results are as dramatic as taking a full hit of 5-MeO-DMT, and for others, the impact might be negligible. However, it is a common consensus that clients, via anecdotal reporting, claim that continuing to listen to session music during their post-session integration phase is generally received as supportive of their overall process, even if full reactivations aren't being achieved. Obviously, I'm a fan of using music in support of people's experiences with 5-MeO-DMT and have found it highly beneficial as both a participant and as a facilitator, and also as an integration guide working with clients to help them navigate the often confusing and challenging process of ongoing energetic experience post 5-MeO-DMT experience. However, I also think that it's important for facilitators to be mindful and respectful of client-patient desires and preferences as well. If a client desires silence, as long as this does not interfere with how the facilitator practices, then this should be accommodated. Some facilitate 5-MeO-DMT sessions outdoors in nature, and hearing the ambient sounds of crashing waves, birds and insects, wind in the leaves, or even an erupting volcano, as one client recently shared with me about her experience, can be powerful sonic support for one's experience, and no music is necessary. There are times where some facilitators might not be comfortable with foregoing music. For those who are serving 5-MeO-DMT as part of a ceremonial or religious practice, the music, chants, and even instruments, such as gongs, singing bowls, etc., might be considered to be integral aspects of the sacred practice. In many cultures and traditions, music, song, chants, and sacred practice and ceremony go hand in hand, and sacred practice would be considered incomplete or even invalid without the proper musical accompaniment. For example, if someone considers themselves to be a, quote, toad shaman who must, quote, make contact with the spirit of the toad via chant during a session, they're going to be highly unlikely to agree to refrain from chanting. Those practicing from a neutral or therapeutic standpoint are likely to be more flexible around the use of sound, music, and sonic input. However, if they see the music as a fundamental and necessary component of the therapeutic process, then they too might be reticent to forego including music. Some facilitators work with singers and musicians, or might be active singers or musicians themselves. When done skillfully, the anecdotal reports from clients that I've received in my integration sessions is that the sound of a gong, chime, flute, didgeridoo, singing bowl, or spontaneous singing can be very powerful drivers of individuals' experience, and it's common for clients to make statements such as, "And when the facilitator started playing that singing bowl, it was the perfect thing I needed right then to really open up to my experience," for example. However, unskilled, intrusive, or what is otherwise perceived as unintuitive, unnecessary musical performance is distracting and unwanted by clients and is felt as something that is imposed upon them. Based on reports, clients seem to feel more comfortable asking for recorded music to be changed or turned off than they are asking musical performances to be stopped, as there's resistance to offending the musician or contradicting the facilitator. I'll wrap up this meditation on music and 5-MeO-DMT experience by sharing a bit more about my personal philosophy around music and 5-MeO-DMT as expressed through my aforementioned Spotify playlist of original music, 5-MeO-DMT Extended Session Playlist, Music for the God Molecule. As a facilitator and non-dual energetic practitioner, I promoted the idea that sessions with 5-MeO-DMT should, ideally, focus on the overall energetic process and experience, and not just on whether someone had a big experience or not. Here, I promoted the idea that working with 5-MeO-DMT is a profound energetic process, and that as a facilitator, I didn't want clients to leave a session feeling, quote, incomplete in their process. This is highly subjective, but I found that when the question was put to clients, they would usually give a confident answer of either yes or no, meaning that while this is not an objective standard or quality that can be universally qualified, at the subjective level, individuals will have an inner knowing and energetic sense of when they are complete or incomplete for the day. I found that most clients didn't feel complete after just one hit or big experience, and that by repeatedly going back into the medicine over an extended period of time, usually several rounds of medicine over roughly 1.5 hours, it was usually sufficient to bring someone to an inner state of feeling complete. As an integration guide, it is common for me to work with clients who claim that they were left feeling incomplete from their 5-MeO-DMT experience because of the conditions in which they were served, such as group work or a time-limited context, or the practice of the facilitator not offering multiple rounds of full-release doses. So, with the idea that I wanted to share a playlist that could be used for extended, multiple round sessions or with longer acting delivery methods such as injection, I created this playlist to last through several rounds, plus what I like to call, quote, bonus time after the energetic work and processing is done. The bulk of the playlist features tracks that are more ambient and spacious in nature, which I feel is important for working with 5-MeO-DMT. I like to use music that resonates and amplifies the qualities of 5-MeO-DMT and also provides positive input, given that the experience can also be terrifying, challenging, and potentially deeply traumatic for individuals. As such, I like to choose songs that I identify as being beautiful or even potentially angelic, heavenly, and ecstatic and blissful. While 5-MeO-DMT experiences are not automatically any of these things, they certainly can be, and for many, 5-MeO-DMT is experienced as the most divine, holy, sacred, and blissfully ecstatic of experiences possible for a human being to have. It was because of this overwhelmingly divine nature of the 5-MeO-DMT experience that I gave it the nickname of the God molecule back in 2008, and also to communicate that the full experience was non-dual, unitary in nature, where the self is perceived and directly experienced as one universal being of infinite intelligence and unconditional love. In other words, we humans get to experience our ultimate nature as God, or the non-dual nature of being, where there is no separation and all is united in universal love. Not everyone experiences these overwhelmingly positive emotions and energies on 5-MeO-DMT. And for those caught in the traps of the ego, the experience can literally be hellish. Here, having music that counters such an experience might serve to help shift someone's experience, even if only unconsciously. To reinforce the sense of positive sacredness, some facilitators like to use music with sacred chants, sometimes in English, sometimes in other languages. Personally, I like to avoid such music, as different clients might react differently to such input, and I think it's good to try and keep things neutral in terms of what cultures or spiritual traditions are being incorporated into the music. Not everyone is going to want to hear kirtan chants, for example. Lyrical music can also be distracting, as it automatically engages the language processing parts of the brain, and in the fullest expression of 5-MeO-DMT, all linguistic categories are transcended into the ineffable. However, I'll note that the song that's been used consistently with the Temple of Awakening Divinity has slight language input with softly spoken female vocals of "Spirit within, eternal." And I never found these phrases to get in the way of my experience in my time attending the temple in 2008 and 2009. With extended sessions with 5-MeO-DMT, either through longer acting delivery methods or through repeated rounds of doses of the medicine, there will be a lot of ebb and flow of the ego, and times where it is completely dissolved, and other times where it is in the process of dissolving or recoalescing. As I've noted previously, it can be very challenging to the ego to do nothing and just be present within the ongoing experience, as profound and overwhelming energies come and go, open, flow, and close down, and having music playing can provide something for the ego to focus on when present. After the peak, if the ego relaxes, and the individual can resist from automatically operating from the structures of the ego, it can dissolve and reform numerous times over a short period of time. With the instructions to relax in symmetry, listen to the music, and just feel yourself, individuals can go in and out of non-dual states and gain a somatic awareness of how to choose to relax, let go of the mind, and dissolve and expand. Note, this is not about processing insights, but about continuing to allow the full somatic and energetic experience. Because the sounds of nature can be deeply healing, connecting, and supportive for people, I also like to use tracks that have nature sounds in them. Birds, sometimes recorded, sometimes me making bird calls, running water, waves, wind, insects, frogs, etc. Including music with nature sounds can reinforce the perception that everything is one grand symphony. It's often the case in deep 5-MeO-DMT experiences that everything that exists is directly experienced as one unified and perfectly integrated whole. In the non-dual state, God, the self, and reality is experienced as a unitary system that is, quote, nothing and everything simultaneously, and where everything exists in perfect relationship and balance with everything else in one overarching, universal, fractal, crystalline structure of being. Music can support this perception and experience. Lastly, I like promoting the idea of bonus time, and to that end, the final 3 tracks on my 5-MeO-DMT extended session playlist all feature beats and more melodic structure than the more open, ambient, spacious, and soundscape-like tracks that dominate the playlist. Here, as described above, after going through a powerful and often overwhelming energetic somatic emotional process, it's common for individuals to feel deeply inspired, empowered, and even charged up. So having music that inspires them to get up and dance, move their bodies, and otherwise ground into the renewed experience of embodied physical reality and agency as an individuated expression of the universal self can be healing, empowering, and also a lot of fun. Movement, stretching, dancing can be a celebration of life, because a full 5-MeO-DMT experience is the experience of ego death, which presents as a fully real death and absorption into the all from which there will be no return. The eventual return to the body and sense of personal self can be a profound joy. Having beautiful, melodic, moving music that supports this can be a real delight and can help ground the overwhelmingly profound beyond the body experience of non-dual reality into the everyday experience of being embodied here, now, in this form, dancing to this song. All of the music featured in the background of this video comes from my 5-MeO-DMT extended session playlist available on Spotify. I also have several other playlists that are made for use with psychedelic or entheogenic sessions. I have my psychedelic session playlist, which covers roughly 7 hours worth of music to inspire and move and bring relevant sonic input into one's psychedelic experience. Another is Enter the Global Ceremonial Circle, which is all music of mine that has a more, quote, ceremonial or perhaps shamanic feel to it with lots of percussion and rhythm. I also have Entheogenic Non-Duality, which is more for contemplation, as this features spoken word with ambient soundscapes to help bring you into a mental non-dual event. I have my playlist Nature Sounds, which features music that includes, obviously, sounds from nature, some of which I have recorded myself, including whales, birds, frogs, insects, even baby alligators. And then I have my Psychedelic Transcend Dance playlist, which is more for use with very active and dance and movement-inspired psychedelics, such as, for example, MDMA or MDA or other related compounds, for people who want instrumental music to get them up and moving to support their psychedelic experience. I hope you've enjoyed this talk. You can learn a lot more about 5-MeO-DMT here at the Entheogenic Evolution on my YouTube channel, also on my podcast of the same name, and of course, you can find my books in print, ebook, and audiobook format at Amazon, the Apple Bookstore, and Audible if you want to learn more about any of these topics related to 5-MeO-DMT, non-duality, psychedelics, energetic processing, somatic expression and embodiment, and more. Thanks for listening.